Nice. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our Train Smart episode with Greg Elliott. So this episode is going to be primarily focusing on heart rate variability, which Greg is the co-founder of HRV course, which was actually a course that I used for my dissertation. As most of you guys know, I'm in my PhD dissertation at Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions, and one of my primary focuses is trying to find a predictor for HRV. So he's also the owner of G-Tech Health and Performance, and I will let him take it away, explain his professional education, background, and all of that.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Dane, for having me here. And this is always great to kind of, again, spread the word of with HRV and kind of get people educated on it. So I'm based out of Vancouver. I'm in Toronto right now, but based out of Vancouver, Canada. Nice. I did my schooling, so my formal education down at Bloomsburg University in Pennsylvania. So I got my master's degree in 2013. Currently in my osteopathic studies in Canada and graduating this year for a very long journey. I know you'll know the feeling soon too. So primarily deal with a lot of chronic pain type patients and more in the rehabilitation setting from there. So so we're talking about my master's had to deal with non-invasive ways of measuring heart function, and that's how I kind of got introduced to HRV, and I'm sure we'll get into the story of how everything came about. But so under my company, I do a lot of my clinical work with Fit to Train in Vancouver. It's an interdisciplinary clinic right downtown in Vancouver, where we have naturopaths and physios and osteopaths and Chinese medicine and massage therapy and all that, and we work as a team to really solve problems. And the other big thing, obviously, is, as you mentioned, is HRV course, where Jason and I put together a few years ago, put together a very well-rounded course on HRV to get it out to the masses a little bit more. So that's where everything is at right now.
That's awesome. It sounds like you have your hands full. So you're definitely staying focused. Well, congratulations. I know that we talked about an April 2020 graduation, and
yes.
Can you actually explain a little bit more about that? Because I know before we got on the Facebook Live, you were talking about just the differences in between those and like the USA versus Canada.
Yeah, so in Canada, they're called osteopathic practitioners, and it's more of a manual therapy degree than it is a doctoral degree.
Okay.
We're talking about medicine, so it's still a long program. It's 5 years, but it's part-time. It's based into, 5 days typically in a row, where you go 8 hours a day, and you spread that over a year. So you do about one a month for 7-8 months.
Nice.
And you kind of build from there. At the end of it, you got to do a thesis, very similar to like a master's thesis at the end of it, and you complete that. And then, at the end of that, you're called an osteopathic practitioner, and you're kind of more along the lines of a physiotherapist, kind of chiropractor type of area.
Nice.
So it's a little bit different, but obviously the big thing that separates itself is the hand skills, which you learn in the States as well.
What's your thesis on?
Very good question. So in the proposal phase right now, primarily it's a little bit simple because there's not a lot of osteopathic research when it comes to heart rate variability. So I'm one of the first ones at the college to really kind of look at it.
Nice.
So to start the process with it all, to introduce it to the college a little bit more, is just going to be the general osteopathic treatment on people, and looking at heart rate variability of those people with chronic pain.
Okay.
So we're going to do obviously a reading, and we're going through various devices. I don't know if I'm going to do more of a continuous monitoring device or a morning readiness from there, depending on what our board wants. From there, I have an idea of kind of where I want to go. I'm going to lean more towards the continuous monitoring, but yeah, so we're going to do a series of treatments, do a pre-post, have a control group, and obviously see what comes out of it.
Nice. It sounds complex. I like it. It's simple but complex. I mean, anything with heart rate variability always has some sort of complexion to it, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing is it's trying to bring a little more objectivity to what we do. Obviously, that's a big complication in regards to the hands-on in our world. There's a very big debate on obviously things that are the reasoning of why doing certain treatments, and the validity behind them, right? With two big groups of people where I think manual therapy does absolutely nothing, and other people where it shows very big benefits. So it's very divided right now. So hopefully we'll provide some evidence to show that there is a benefit, which obviously I see in the clinic lots, from all our practitioners. So to kind of bring some sort of credibility towards it is going to be hopefully a good start.
That's awesome, man. So I look forward to this episode just because of the things that we're going to be talking about. I know a lot of it is, if anyone's looking forward to learning these different types of things, the HRV course is a phenomenal course. It's something that was purchased on my side just to help out with my dissertation and help expand my knowledge of HRV. And then obviously continuing that education and that research just to help strive for it. But I mean, there's a lot of things that obviously heart rate variability can do, and it's not necessarily just one population. The athletics and sports performance, they use it on a daily basis. I know a lot of collegiate settings that use that for the morning just to see exactly what their body should be taking on within stress of specific training protocols. If their body is, say, or sleep deprived, but then that athlete might just have that motivational, they really want a hardy personality and they go into it. But as a coach, we really need to step in and make these modifications for these individuals. Stress is stress. I mean, stress is obviously going to lead to these different types of adaptations from that response. But a big thing I wanted to talk about first is there's a variety of metrics. There's the frequency domains or the time domains. Could you explain a few and then kind of what they mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the biggest reason why we wanted to create the course in the first place. The reason why is because there was these different areas of people using heart rate variability for different things, right? So you do have the sports performance realm that uses, obviously, from a training readiness standpoint. You have the emotional health or the emotional stress side, where they're trying to get heart coherence to be more in a stress-free type state. You have the medical community using it for various medical tests. You have the nutrition community. I mean, there's so many different things, and I don't think the whole holistic understanding of take it back and, okay, what are the basics of HRV? Like, what is this actually measuring, and what we're doing from there, right? So that's what came out with the course, because the biggest questions we always example question would be, we get an athlete and say, well, I had a tough workout, it told me to rest, so I rested. And then the next day, it said I was stressed again. But I took a rest day. It doesn't make sense. Okay, well, if you ate a pizza, ate pizza and had, Fruit Loops for breakfast, and then you went out drinking and then you didn't sleep, yes, that's going to affect you, right? So people don't realize, or you fought with your girlfriend or husband or whatever it may be, right? There's various things that can cause stress. So we wanted to kind of bring everything together and make people understand of the holistic picture of HRV. So there are a bunch of statistics of HRV, and this is where I think the research, it got kind of lost at the beginning, because everyone was really looking at different statistics, and not, this kind of group where we started to see in probably the last 10 to 15 years, a really narrowing down of kind of, these are the important statistics from there. So you have obviously the time domain, which obviously has to do with time. You have frequency domain, which obviously has to do with the frequency of the heart rhythm from there. So it really depends. Each of these has its own kind of understanding to this point. Some of the statistics, we don't know fully what's going on at this point. We have kind of a general idea. But obviously the main ones are now kind of are streamlined. And this is where my knowledge of the equations are not great in regards to what they calculate, but for what they are. So you'll see a common ones. A very common one, obviously, is the RMSSD, which is the root mean squared of successive differences. This is where a majority of the applications typically use this value to determine your heart rate variability. So more often than not, if you have a HRV app that measures your heart rate variability, it's based on a calculation from this statistic. Yeah. So that's the most common one. The other one you'll typically see is SDNN, which is standard deviation of R to R, which obviously you need a little bit more readings, and that's more of the medical journals. We'll kind of look at that in regards to kind of heart health over a longer period of time. And then you kind of get into the more of the frequency domain statistics. Obviously, you heard about low frequency and high frequency. It's just about obviously the frequency, the bandwidth. Yep. Where, you know, in a very crude way, what it used to be explained was that the low frequency bandwidth had to do with more sympathetic interaction, and the high frequency had more parasympathetic. The high frequency is more of your rest and digest, and parasympathetic, we kind of have a good correlation around that. And then obviously the high frequency, the low frequency is a combination of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. They kind of give you, so a lot of people are putting weights into the ratios of how much of each of those bandwidth, and they're kind of making assumptions if you're more sympathetic and parasympathetic, and we haven't necessarily seen that be true unless it's drastically different. Yep. Right, so we have the more common thing you'll see in literature is the HF-LF ratio, right? So how much low frequency to high frequency you have. The lower the score was deemed to be more parasympathetic, the higher the score would be more sympathetic. So those are probably the more common ones you would see, but I'll tell you right now, if you have an application where you're measuring heart rate variability with, more than likely it's going to be the first one, the RMSSD, that they're going to use to calculate your heart rate variability.
Absolutely. And I love that. I mean, there's so many different types of metrics that comes from one single type of reading. And you know, there's a variety of applications out there. I mean, that's what I've always tried to tell a lot of individuals that, you know, when I've done my presentations, a lot of my 2019 presentations for the NSCA was heart rate variability driven. So, you know, when I've had individuals that come up to me and ask me on these different types of metrics, you know, the data and the research is still lacking. I think that's something that we're trying to push forward. We're trying to obviously get these different types of populations utilized. And as you know, when we were talking earlier, you know, mine's going to be law enforcement with heart rate variability. And truthfully, there's limited on that. Like when I was doing my research on that, I'm like, but again, I'm trying to open the doors to that. So hopefully other HRB specialists can obviously start to dive into this a little bit deeper so that we can learn more. And that's the biggest thing. But now I kind of want to move forward into like the application approach. You know, there's these different populations, but how can we utilize this for these different populations? You know, it could be the medical base, it could be nutritionists as a dietitian can be using this. It could be a sports. Like, how would you recommend off of your expertise to apply this to these populations?
Yeah, the biggest thing is a lot of people start taking it with out a goal in mind, right? And you got to be able to understand of first off is you have to set a goal of what you want to be able to achieve. So when I'm working with somebody, the first thing is and these people are in chronic pain, and I always go, okay, what's your goal, right? And they always go, well, I want to be out of pain. And I'm like, well, that's not good enough. What has this stopped you in order to be doing, right? Do you want to play with your grandkids? Do you want to be gardening? Do you want to, you know, do an Ironman? Like, what is it stopping you from doing that's kind of limiting these factors? Then we go, okay, that's what we have to achieve in order to get there. And HRV to me is making sure that what I'm doing is benefiting the person in the long term, right? Be able to look kind of down the road as I have an objective number. As you know, with the FMS and the SFMA, you know, you have your objective measures of marking these things from there. And like I said, there's too much subjectivity in a lot of stuff that we do where, you know, I can treat somebody and be like, oh, that feels better, right? Oh, yeah, to my hands, where I don't know if it's my mind telling me that I did it or whatever, but I want to be able to have some sort of number, because if I can have someone where they can't bend backwards at all, and I do some sort of treatment and an exercise, all of a sudden they can now bend back. I go, okay, perfect, right? That's a measurement. We have certain guidelines that you can meet. Perfect, good. And we have a systematic approach in order to do that. So it depends on obviously the population. So mine is more, so you kind of use my domain first, where you talk about the general health of people is one. So I deal with a lot of general health as well as people in chronic pain. So it can be used in so many different domains, and I'll give you an example of what I do. So in a lot of the pain research that I've done, HRV does not correlate to if you're going to be in pain or not, right? So it doesn't get to say if you have a poor HRV, it doesn't mean you're going to be more pain, and vice versa. Just because HRV is good doesn't mean you're going to be in less pain. What we look at is that we kind of say, okay, whether you're in pain or not, right? HRV gives you an idea of how much adaptability you can have during that day. So whether you can go out and do these things, right? So if you have a big day planned and you have a poor HRV, you have to do things during that day to make sure that we don't go down the rabbit hole of you going back to this cycle of pain. So, okay, you have a poor HRV today, but you got a big meeting. Okay, make sure you go for a walk, get outside. Don't drink, 8 cups of coffee today, type of things, right? Just do these little changes, little things to the day, because having a more consistent HRV to a sense is the biggest thing that I need to start with people. We can't have these up and downs, which is usually what I see in chronic pain patients. It's like the first week they're on it, like if they do the morning readiness, it's like one day it's here, one day it's here, one day it's that, one day it's this, and like it's very hard to understand when to implement change. You have to be able to kind of get some sort of consistency around things first. So that's an example of mine, but we've had some interesting things. So I'll kind of go through various topics. So from a general health perspective, I've seen it, people obviously in a lot of literature has to do around the heart, which makes sense in regards to the prognosis of people coming off of heart attacks, right? So if people have a better heart rate variability outside after getting a heart attack, they're able to leave the hospital faster, and as well, their reoccurrence of another event is significantly minimalized, right? So that's a very positive thing. So that's a mark for us that this will keep you out of the hospital if you have some sort of heart issue, right? So, or we talk about specifically with heart attacks. So that talks about general health. I mean, that's one of the main, obviously, contributors to our health crisis right now. Yeah. When it talks about nutrition, Alessandro Ferretti is a fantastic nutritionist in the UK that does a lot of food sensitivity testings with heart rate variability, and he's developed his own algorithm combining heart rate variability and blood glucose values to determine, if there's an inflammatory response to various foods, right? So, when you come to, I'm not a huge believer in the food sensitivity testing. I think you can almost throw that stuff out the window. From what I've seen, I'll call it like it is. I don't like it because I think it's almost has that fear mentality around things, and a lot of the time I don't see it being true for a lot of stuff. So. Same thing with the whole, genetic testing, which I won't get into now, but this is a big area of various things, and if we can have some sort of actual marker to determine these things, that's as reliable, credible as heart rate variability and blood glucose, you're more likely to be on the right track and understanding where various things can be inflammatory or not. Yeah. And then you talk about sleep, all the studies now going with sleep apnea and heart rate variability, where you don't necessarily have to do all of these crazy lab tests anymore, where you can literally wear a continuous monitoring device and have some pretty good idea about your sleep apnea, which is fantastic, right? Because of SpO2 and heart rate and respiration rate and all these things that can now be measured through various devices. So, talk about sleep and recovery. That's a great way to use HRV from that perspective to see if people are recovering properly. Absolutely. And then obviously the emotional health side of things, where people can understand of when there's a stressful event, how to be able to calm themselves down and kind of get into that stressless state, or to remove stressors there to get into a centered being, be making connections with yourself and being very aware of what's going on is another kind of side benefit. So, I mean, and then obviously the physical activity and sports side, but I mean, it really, you can target this to anything. And to me, it's, and I've said this from day one when I started learning about this, I don't know of one better biomarker that you can readily accessible on a day-to-day basis, non-invasively than this.
Yeah, absolutely. Say it's non-invasive too. I think that's one of the coolest things about it. It's like, you don't actually have to go inside, get a scalpel, and all of a sudden like dig in and try to find something. I love the fact that what you first talked about, you were talking about like, utilizing SMART goals. It's, I want to be out of pain. Okay, that's great. But like, what are some different, deeper meanings and different ways that we can interpret this goal so that we can make it a little bit more realistic and put more specifics to it? And I mean, that's the biggest thing that comes from is we want to be able to help out individuals. And a lot of times as a fitness and health professional, we might have to kind of take the deeper step into it and kind of help guide them through those different types of goals. And that happens on a regular basis. I mean, it happens with me, someone, I want to lose weight. Okay. Like, but you want to lose weight, how much, when? And then all of a sudden they say 2 weeks. Okay, how much you want to lose in 2 weeks? And then it comes a little bit more where we have to make it realistic. And I love that perspective that you put into it. And every single population, it can be used. It's just determining what type of variables and what research is actually be able to provide for that. And kind of moving into like the next question, it's more about the future of heart rate variability. And this can be, there's so many different things. I mean, I know each heart rate variability specialist can probably obviously have like their own thought on this, but in your opinion, where do you see heart rate variability going in about 5 to 10 years from now?
So the biggest thing that I'm sure you've seen and I've seen even since when I first started. I mean, I started doing this routinely in 2013. So it's been 6 years of doing this nonstop, right? Of talking about it and lecturing on it and doing courses on it and using it with my clients. And you start to see like the change in technology and even the last couple of years from when it was is unreal, right? To the accessibility of clinical data now and the companies kind of racing towards this. Um, you know, continuously wearable device that provides, statistically relevant data and valid data. It's unreal, right? To a point now where, you're getting technology that, you can wear on a wrist or on an arm or, on a chest, and it's so tiny and so small, but it's all clinically valid and is validated against the gold standards. You go, this is amazing, right? And to start to see these companies and I think that's been driving, obviously, now that's, Apple's gone into the wearables, the Fitbit has grown in the way that it is people are really starting to understand, the biometric data and how important it is. So in 5 to 10 years, I mean, HRV is going to be such an important important biomarker for every profession. And I'd be surprised, the biggest lag, and I'm running into this problem right now, and I won't get into it too much, obviously, but the biggest lag is getting the medical community involved and understanding this. I've done lectures and they understand the research, but it's like, well, yeah, there's not enough. Well, of course not, right? It takes time. But when you talk to the thousands of people, and this is what I love doing, especially with people like you and all the people around the world that are on the ground starting to use this stuff and starting to make, I mean, some of the stories I hear people do and some of the correlations they find with the, millions of data points that they currently have, it's like, it's unreal. It's not published, but there's so much information for these people that provide and start to look at these correlations, like the stuff with Alessandro Ferretti that he's starting to publish now, but he knew about this years ago, right? So it's okay. Yeah, it's going to take a while. People are going to have to do this thing, but it's getting them involved. I think that's when really going to start to turn around to understand that this is a valid number that we can accurately measure that's correlated to all these things. They're going to start to jump on board a lot. So my hope ever since day one, and I'm guessing in 5 to 10 years that it should start to be a main staple in a lot of the medical community, right?
Yeah.
To be able to monitor these things, and they're getting more, especially I don't know too much in the U.S. in regards to stuff, but in Canada, like telehealth is getting huge, right? So these devices where you get a scale at home that you step on, which gets uploaded to this online portal that your doctor has access to. Right. Yep. So it starts to have these doctors can now do distance consultations and meetings and, having that integration with various things. And I'm telling you, this is going to be a gigantic part of it. So I think, with the sports performance realms, pretty big on it now, and they kind of have a good understanding of what's going on, starting to more than any other of the communities, the psychological component of understanding the vagus nerve. And, you get the whole, the side of stress. Nutrition is getting there too. I start to see a little bit more. Sleep, obviously, the sleep apnea has really exploded when it comes to HRV, and I think the last one is the toughest one, is the medical community. So I really see in 10 years, I think there's going to be a big integration in regards to the medical side of things.
Absolutely, and I love that where the technology is kind of advancing. I mean, I think that's huge. I mean, now you're seeing a lot of like the PPG sensors kind of taking a big jump on it, and reading the research, the validity on that is still it's still missing a little bit, but it's working on it. I think with honestly 5 to 10 years, it's going to be like off the charts. I think like the sensors that we're going to have, like I think it's Aura Ring. Like Aura Ring now has a ring that like does all this type of stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you talk about, what Marco Altini is doing with HRV for training and all his stuff with PPG, with the lights, and like, and he's a data scientist, man. Like he's on that, trying to validate his stuff, and more and more of these devices are coming out and try to be valid, and it's only going to grow the technology because everyone's going to go and try to race towards get the most accurate one, right? So the fact that it's out there and these people are getting close, like I said, in 5 to 10 years, I have zero doubt that you will get a continuous wearable device that can monitor HRV accurately. Like it's not a question of if, it's just a matter of when.
Yeah, it's a matter of like when all of this starts to come out. And I know Apple has done a good job in their fourth iWatch. It's come out with good technology in that. And I know that I kind of use it on a daily basis, but I mean, I'm a big Elite HRV individual. I mean, that's what I'm using for my study is the dashboard from there.
Yeah.
It's just the variability that comes with it. It's obviously always going to be with HRV. I mean, that's the big thing about HRV. There is going to be variability into it no matter what we do. Like we move, it's going to change, heart rate's going to change, and all these different types of things. Respiration is going to change. But I mean, yeah, it's kind of like the big thing. I mean, there's a lot of research that shows and supports everything that it's doing, but at the same time, I hope that we can start strengthening it more. Just because, I mean, my biggest focus in my career is recovery towards general population, recovery towards law enforcement, recovery towards just even athletic population as well. And heart rate variability can be one of those things that is used. And I've seen a lot of coaches that are starting to use that as like when that athlete comes right into that room, that training room, that's the first thing they do. Like they just go, they take their thing, and all of a sudden the coach is going to look at it, monitor it to see where they're at, and they'll communicate with them and be like, you know what, we were planning on doing a very high volume, high intensity training today, but based off of your reading, we're just going to dial it down a little bit. We're just going to do some different types of things. And that's a good thing, just because, I mean, we know as an athlete, you are motivated, you have that influential factor that's going to keep pushing you to keep driving and keep moving. But at the same time, we need to listen to our bodies. If we don't, I don't want to say bad things can happen, but some negative things can happen. Might be detrimental. So,
well, it's interesting because, you know, in the chronic pain realm, you know, what's important is not only objective data, but also the subjective data, what people are saying and all that type of stuff. And I think that's been a big missing piece in a lot of different things. Is sometimes we get overrun by analytics, and you don't, you know, you lose the art part of it all, right? There's the science, but there's an art of it as well, right? And you know, as you get more experience, you understand the things a little bit more and a little bit deeper. And you know, sometimes it's, you know, talking about the general population, you know, it's great that if HRV is perfect, you slept great, and you have all these objective data, everything's rocking and rolling. If that person doesn't want to be there, right, that's going to affect what's going on, right? Like you understand, it's you can't roll them into the ground if they're not in a good place mentally, right? If they're you know, they're motivated or their mind is somewhere else in regards to various things, you know, that's going to weigh on everything. So I mean, the subjectivity component to it is sometimes, you know, this is where, you know, the coaches, I think coaches do a great job, trainers do a great job understanding that kind of subjectivity of where people are going and adapting the fly. And HRV just adds a little bit of tool on top of that. But, you know, everything's got to be taken in and weighted depending on the person. But no, I mean, what Jason's done in regards to Elite HRV is he's honestly, like, in my opinion, he's brought HRV to the masses. You know, before Jason, it was very hard to, it's very expensive to get an HRV device, honestly, like it really was. And Jason goes, you know what? It's free, right? As long as you have a heart rate strap, you can use it. And it was unreal, right? So he's really brought it to the masses and made it very competitive and open for everyone to be able to do it. So, you know, he's spent a lot of time and a lot of dedication and a lot of years grinding to get to the point where he's at now. So he's done a great job. And yeah, with talk about the dashboard and all that stuff, I couldn't speak more highly than the guys at Elite HRV there.
It is. It's a great source. That's like the biggest thing is, you know, with the study that I'm doing, it's like we're going to be able to obviously get these officers to go home and take a reading. And some of the technology you have to pay for, it's expensive, and, you know, all these different things that are obviously going to help push it forward. But allowing that capacity is wonderful. You know, be like, hey, like, that's what I've been telling all my participants. I'm like, it's free. Like, don't worry about it. Like, basically, like, you could just download the application and we're good to go. Like, don't worry about paying for it. Like, it's all covered for. And then that's one of the biggest things is, you know, people don't want to download something and all of a sudden have to pay the application store or Android store or whatever the case may be to get it done. But there's so much information that we went over. It was amazing. You know, there's so much within heart rate variability. I think we probably covered 20 to 30% of it. And
yeah,
there's so much more.
That's generous.
It is generous.
Yeah.
It is. I was trying to put a percentage on it. I'm like maybe a little bit less than that, but there's so much more, and it goes in depth. And I think that's what, if anyone's looking to use heart rate variability for just their clientele or just personally, and that's something that you want to kind of see what it is. Feel free to contact us. We're very helpful when it comes to that type of situation. Can you provide any information on like just ways to contact you if anyone has any questions?
Yeah, totally. So you can contact me a couple ways. So my general email for my company is gtechhealth@gmail.com. I can also do greg@fittotrain.com or greg@hrvcourse.com. A lot of different ones, I know. But I use all of them. They're all into one email, so it's all good. And like I said, if you guys are curious about HRV course or the stuff with that to learn more, we do routine Q&As just about understanding what the course is. And then once you're in the course portal, again, we called it the foundations of HRV because it's the basics of understanding. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around what the basics are. So we do that. But what we do is for every participant, since day one, we host about 3 to 4 Q&A webinars every year. So people can ask high-level questions, right? And this is the real application of stuff. And, it benefits us that we learn and we understand a little bit more every time we do that, because we get some questions to go, oh, yeah, what about this? And what about that? And we start to talk to the people around the world that do this. So we get some pretty high-level answers. And what's nice is that when you're in the course, all the webinars are recorded and they're cataloged. So if you have a certain question, you can type it in and you can be able to find what's going on. So we have hours and hours of data on top of that, and information as well as the course. So if you have any questions, you can head over there. Again, email me at any time. I'm more than happy to answer various questions. But yeah, no, that's kind of the places to check me out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Greg. I hope that you have a good rest of your day. If anyone has any questions, obviously feel free to contact us. We're always here to help out.
Yeah. Thanks, Dane, for so much for taking your time to do this. I know it's a Saturday night, and well, for me, it's Saturday night, but not for you. A little bit earlier for you. But again, I always appreciate these talks, and anytime you want to do this again, I'd be more than happy to do it.
Absolutely. Take it easy.
Yeah. Thank you.